Today, we're going to be finishing the river scene painting by painting in the trunk and branches of our tree. Because this tree is a neutral tone, we're going to be creating it by mixing complementary colors together. Begin by combining a lot of ultramarine blue, a little bit of orange, and then a touch of crimson red. We're adding in a touch of crimson red to give it that subtle, warmer purple color that we're seeing. But the orange is added in to turn it back into a more neutral brown. Continue combining a lot of ultramarine blue and little touches of orange and crimson red until you have enough pigment to last you throughout the entire painting of your tree. When painting in your tree, this value should only be a few shades darker than what we previously have. So if it's too dark, add water to your pigment on the palette and then continue painting it in once you have the correct value. Use your round synthetic brush and apply this bluish gray tone in with short curving marks. The shortened marks will help give the illusion of bark. The curved direction of each mark will reveal the three-dimensional surface characteristic of this form. Pay attention to the highlights in the tree and avoid putting this darker value in those areas. Keeping this tone on the right-hand side of all the branches will start building up the darker values that will ultimately help us lead to building up into our core shadow areas. When you paint in your branches, the brush should be barely touching the surface of the paper, as we want the branches to be very thin. Whenever you're painting branches, keep them looking organic by having them be slightly bumpy or wonky. Don't paint them in as straight angled lines. This will make the tree look too mechanical and too rigid. Therefore, as always, paint what you see in the reference photo. Analyze the direction and shape of each branch and paint in what you see, not what you think you see. To help give the direction or the little thinning out of the branch, lift up the pressure of your brush as you end each branch, because that will help make it look a lot more realistic. And as you can see, I'm adding in some extra branches that I initially did not have. So if you're missing any branches, now would be the time to start adding them in. And remember, we want this tree to have the most amount of detail. So making sure that you're painting in every individual branch will help pull this tree forward in the composition and make it more of a focal point. After you've put in the middle values with the color we just mixed, we're going to mix a slightly darker grayish tone by combining a lot of ultramarine blue again, adding a little bit of light orange, a touch of the crimson red, but this time we're going to be adding in a touch of black to deepen the value of this gray tone. You're noticing that I'm adding a lot of pigment back in because one, I want to make sure I have enough to paint the whole tree without having to stop and remix. But also I'm trying to continue putting in these same three colors with a little bit of black until I achieve the hue that's the one matching in the photo. So keep combining all these colors together until you achieve the correct hue, but also have enough pigment to where you're going to have enough to do the whole entire tree. And if you notice, I'm doing some color samples outside of the screen here, which you can't unfortunately see, but I'm noticing that it's not really a tone yet, so I added a little bit more orange. I'm thinning it out with a little bit of water so it's not too dark, only a few shades darker, and then I can start painting it in. And I'm only painting in this color because the previous color has fully dried. Remember, we're doing wet on dry. So everything has to be dry before you start painting in these consecutive darker colors. And this time, as we're starting to put in these darker values, we're going to be filling up less amounts of the tree. So it's not going to take us as much time as the first layer of gray that we previously put in. But it is still very important that we're following the surface characteristic of each form, the contour of each tree, and that we're putting the values that we're seeing in the proper spot. So our light source is coming from the upper left-hand corner, meaning that all of our darker values are going to be sitting in the middle to right-hand side of our branches and the bottom side of the branch. So as you're putting this in, pay attention to that. Also pay attention to how the light is interplaying with, the values on each individual branch. It kind of creates this like choppy effect. So when you get to these, middle branches that we're seeing here, I'm only doing short little tiny marks because I'm trying to create the illusion that, the light shining through the leaves is creating this shimmering effect on the branches. So paying attention to this detail and painting what you see and what you think you see will add a heightened sense of realism to the work. After adding in the darkest values to the branches in the upper right hand side, revisit the trunk of the tree once it's fully dry with the same color we've just repainting. This is a form of glazing. Watercolor is transparent, so it helps show the previous values through the certain colors. And because of that, it's going to help make this color look even darker. I'm only putting this in as little fine bits of detail to show the reflections of certain leaves that are casting a shadow onto the trunk, while also putting in the core shadow on the right hand side of the trunk. After you've done this step, you have completed the river scene painting. So take a picture of your work, submit it into Schoology, and good job.